Hi everybody, welcome to my channel. Today's video is about events and listeners. Events and listeners are two entities that helps us to split our code logic into two different entities, which makes our code more manageable and organized. So events are just classes in Laravel, which will be triggered once or based on other things occur in our application. For example, once user registers, so we can leverage this event and to do something. For example, to send welcome email. So creating events and listeners is straightforward, it's easy process in Laravel. So even registration of these listeners into related events can be done automatically, which is really helpful, powerful. So Laravel, which detect automatically a listener to a specific event, and one event can be mapped to different independent listeners. So in this demonstration video, I will walk you through a normal workflow process in Laravel. So event listeners are not Laravel specific, can be created or used in other frameworks in different programming languages. So once we create a Laravel project, especially Laravel 11, so events and listeners folders are absent. So we can easily create one by using the handy tool of PHP artisan command. So we will see it in a minute. So before we get started, just make sure that you have at least PHP 8.2 installed in your system, because Laravel 11 accepts, in order to be created, we must have at least 8.2 PHP version. So I will create a new Laravel project, so composer, and also make sure that you have a composer already installed in Laravel in your system globally or locally. So create project Laravel /Laravel. So the folder, I will name it events listeners Laravel. So our Laravel project has been added successfully. So as you may read here, so Laravel has already run migration because it uses SQLite database, which is a file-based database. So just for the sake of testings, I will be using it as well. So let's reach our newly created project and let's open it in VS Code, Visual Code Editor. So we can create our event listeners, so will be shown in our app folder once we run or create our first event or listener. So in order to create our first listener, we can use the handy PHP artisan command. So artisan make event. So let's call it registration event. So here we go. So event folder is created and our event is put inside the event folder. So in this registration event, we notice we have this broadcast on function. It's used primarily for WebSocket interactions along with this thread interact with socket. So In this demonstration video, we will not be using these channels or any WebSocket, so I will get rid of it and I will omit also this thread. Other threads, for example, the serializes models thread is to tell the system that if we use a queue listeners, listeners that are run in the background, in order to boost this process or to speed up a little bit the process, the model eloquent can be converted to a string or an array. And the system will convert it back to its original format in order to be consumed in our application again. And dispatchable thread is used in order to create an instance of this registration event, and at the same time to use the dispatch method that we'll see in seconds. So in this event, I will pass a user model eloquent into the construct method. So first of all, I will fetch the model and create it and store it into this class by creating a public property. So public user, to type in the user variable and the user. So after creating our registration event, now we need to create our user controller that will handle HTTP request in registration process of user. And later on, I will add a route that will listen to the post request and will be this request will be headed to this controller. So the user controller that will be creating in a second, to create our controller, we will use artisan command, make controller user controller, or you can name it whatever you want, or just controller and so on. So make controller. So our controller will be added to the HTTP controllers folder. So in user controller, we will create register function where we add register function that will handle registration for us. I will pass the request HTTP facade. So this line of code will fetch first of all the user details from the request, and to create a user and to add user to the database. So user. So this is the first thing that we have to do, and the second one is to dispatch the event. So registration events that we have created. So dispatch function, and to pass the user. So user that will be returned after creating or after adding the user into the database, and the final line of code is to return the response or JSON response. So message user added successfully, and the status code, which is 201. So after creating user controller, we have to add it to a route. So I will create API route instead of web, because I will be using the Postman tool. So first of all, we have to install the API into our project. So install API. So PHP artisan install API because I need API file in the root folder to add API resources. So after our API system is installed, I will add post row that would handle post request to register a new user. So route post users user controller class register. This is register methods. So after defining our first event, in our case registration event, and defining our user controller to handle HTTP requests that handed over to the route that tied to the user controller, now it's time to create our first listener, which is a send welcome email listener that handle this event. As I mentioned in the previous clips, that an event can be tied to different listeners, and each listener does specific task. In this case, send welcome email will send welcome email to the user, newly registered user. We can create another listener. Feel free to do it and explore how you can have bundle of listeners tied or mapped to just one event. So I will create the listener PHP artisan same way as events, but now we'll create a listener. So send welcome mail listener. So welcome mail listener. So we can attach the listener name to it, or you can just call it as send welcome mail. So let's add the listener to it. So the new listener will be added to the listeners folder, and this listener has one single handle function, which is will handle the event, which accept the events. In this case, we have registration event. So registration events. So this listener, if you want to be handled or be executed in the background, we should add the traits, the interface, implement the interface of should queue, which instructs our system, our Laravel application, to run this handler in the background instead of using in the single thread, or which may lag our application. So, but I will cover this topic later on in this demonstration. But now let's so we can add the interface, implement the interface. So before that, I have to create a mailable in order to execute or to send to send the email to the user. So I will create mailable. So PHP artisan make mailable welcome mail. Not mailable, it's mail. Welcome mail. So the same process as event listener. So mail folder will be created and the new mailable will be added or put into it, as you can see here. So what is a mailable? Mailable is a class that holds entities or components in order to send an email. So we have a content which contains the view and any parameters we need to add to this view. We have the attachments. If we want to attach a file like PDF or image or whatnot, we have the new envelope, which hold the subject and from property. So we'll come to our application, will be our subject. Same thing, we need to pass the user because we needed to, in order to render its name in the mail template. So user. And we also need from information. So from, you can either fetch it from the in file or you can directly type it here in the new envelope. So like example, just for sake of testing, so test.com. So that would be the sender email, which is our application. Next, we need to create a template or email template. To do so, we can go to the resources view. Let's create a mail folder that will hold all our applications mailing or mail templates. So mail, inside the mail, send welcome mail blade PHP. So the content of this mail template will be primitive. So just div and welcome the name of the user. So user name to our application. So we need to pass the user variable to the template. So an array user this user to be accessed inside the mail template that we have created. So this welcome mail mailable, I will add it to the mail listener. So use mail. So first of all, user equal registration event user. So why we did this? Because once we register a new user using the Eloquent create method of Eloquent model and user controller, we passed the user collection to the dispatch function or method of the registration event. So, which means that registration event will store the user instance or user to the class, and now this property can be accessed whenever we pass the registration event to a listener handler function. So we will be able to access the user instance. Now we will need to use this mailable inside the listener in order to do its task. So first, mail to our user. So user email, send a new welcome mail and pass the user. So now it's time to register listener to its related event. So to do that, we have three ways. First one is the event discovery, which is a mechanism came with in Laravel, that once we have registered or once we have passed an event or type in event into the handle method, so Laravel will automatically detect this event and map it to this listener. So the mechanism is already done automatically. We don't have to tweak or fine tune some things manually. It's already done for us. And another way is to register it or in our app service provider. So another way, which is called registration or registering listeners manually, we can use the event listen or events facade, which is event facade, events listen, and we need to add the registration events, class, and it's or the listener or handler of this event. So in our case, we have registration, send mail, welcome mail listener as a class as well. So in this case, we tell Laravel that we need to bind this listener into or to this registration event. The third option or third way is to call or to pass a closer, which is a function calls another function. So function, we have a registration event, registration events. So we can write our listener directly into, doesn't make our code organizable. But you can use this closure. The most important thing is that you know that exists another option how to map or to create a registration handler using the closure listeners. So in order to configure our email system, we need to configure it inside the mail config file. So Laravel, once we create a new project, it already fetched the mail mailer from the in file as a default. So if we define another one, so we head to event, in file, and it uses log as a default, but we will be using the SMTP option. And in the mail, this one instead of log, but you can use log in order to test these things out, but I will use the mail trap. In mail trap we can copy we'll be using the SMTP. So after we are done with configuration of our application, now it's time to test things out. So first of all, we need to make sure that our application is running. To do so, we need to run PHP artisan serve. When you create Laravel application locally without using any Docker or WSN in case of Windows or etc. So to run our application locally, artisan serve. So now application running on localhost with port 8000. Earlier in this video, I mentioned that if we want to run our listener in the background, we need to implement the shell queue interface. But in order this to work properly, we need to run the queue work. So PHP artisan queue work in order. So Laravel will now listen to dispatch or defer the jobs. In our case, we will add our send welcome mailer listener to the job queue to be processed in the background. So this mechanism makes our application more robust and boost a little bit or ameliorate a little bit the performance of our application, especially if your application is processing heavy files or other heavy tasks. So showed queue can be implemented in this case. So I forgot to define our email template. So mail send welcome mail. So we need to add the prefix. So Laravel will do this for us. So let's head to the Postman. So let's create a new user. So my email.test or our application.com. So password will be password. So let's give it a try. So as you can see, user added successfully with the 2.1 status code or 2.01 status code. So let's now go to the mail trap and bam. So this is our welcome email. So I hope that this video gives you an overview how event and listeners work in Laravel 11. And I hope that this video is helpful for you. If you like this content, don't forget to press like button and subscribe to the channel. And thank you for watching and see you in the next videos.